book number 1, The Intelligence Trap, which is something we've probably all experienced at one point in our lives, where we know somebody hyper-intelligent or hyper-educated that may be a little bit more susceptible to making mistakes that we can't comprehend. And you explored exactly why that was in detail, didn't you?
Right, exactly. Because I was really inspired by these kind of Nobel Prize winners who would then, kind of fall for scams or, believe in these kind of very shaky beliefs that just didn't seem to stand up to any kind of logical scrutiny. So one of the kind of prime examples was this guy called Kary Mullis, who discovered the PCR reaction, which is, it's useful for amplifying small bits of genetic material, which is how we use it in, lots of medical testing, including the COVID tests that we would have to send off to hospitals to analyze during the pandemic. And, there's no doubting the kind of genius in him discovering this reaction. But then he also believed in a load of things that just, do not stand up to scientific scrutiny. So he denied the link between HIV and AIDS, for example, and that is something that I think has been proven so robustly by now. But he was really going against the scientific consensus, and he was just wrong about that. I mean, you still get AIDS denialists who will disagree with me, but those people are at the absolute fringes of the scientific community. If we take logical deduction and the scientific method seriously, we have to disagree with Kary Mullis there. And there were lots of other beliefs he had. He denied that CFCs cause global warming, and he believed in that astrology was more robust than psychology for understanding the human mind. So clearly there's this enigma, like how could you be so clever and so stupid? And I just really wanted to understand that.
What were the overarching conclusions? Because we've all met, maybe we haven't, I don't know. I've definitely met people that are hyper-intelligent, but equally, it's common sense tends to be where there's sometimes lacking, isn't there? So I guess I've always wondered if there's a danger of hyper-specialization and there's diminishing returns beyond the point where maybe your brain just runs out of RAM or processing power to take in other things. I don't know. So what were the conclusions?
I mean, so there is a German concept for what you described, that hyper-specialization. They call it, and apologies for my pronunciation, but Fachidiot, which is someone who is so kind of narrowly specialized that they just can't see beyond the boundaries of their very particular discipline. And I love that concept. But the more general conclusions, firstly, it was that we are all susceptible to cognitive biases. So things like confirmation bias, anchoring effects, all of these things that Daniel Kahneman had looked at, where we tend to go with our kind of gut instincts, our hunches, rather than thinking about things very deliberatively and analytically. And what the research showed there was that our susceptibility to these biases, so our kind of broad irrationality, so the susceptibility to irrational biases, that doesn't really correlate as strongly as we would like with measures of intelligence or with academic success. So you have easily enough variation that you can have someone who scores brilliantly in academic exams, but they don't apply that intelligence to thinking, to thinking through problems carefully in real life. At least when they're not told to do so in a particular way. So we called that dysrationalia. It's a well-studied and well-established phenomenon now. And now the second means that by which smart people can act stupidly is when maybe they've suffered from dysrationalia to form this kind of very strong emotional belief about something. So they have that very strong instinct. But then, rather than applying their intelligence to interrogate that belief, they actually just use their intelligence to justify that belief. And so we do see that with lots of politically contentious issues, that actually you see greater polarization with greater levels of knowledge or intelligence. And that seems to be because people are just knuckling down. They're not really trying to kind of weigh up the different sides of the conflict and to come to some kind of compromised position, but they are coming to diametrically opposed positions because they have become attached to a certain belief, and then they're just using their intelligence to justify it, to knock down any evidence that might contradict their point of view, to find holes in that in ways that aren't rational. So the ideal thing, the rational thing, would always be to try to analyze all evidence equally, depending on its merits and irrespective of the conclusion that it draws to. But people, when they suffer from this motivated reasoning, they're not doing that. And I give in my book, I give some examples of famous cases of this, like Arthur Conan Doyle, clearly understood logical deduction in his Sherlock Holmes books, but then he believed in a whole load of like hoaxes and, like the Cottingley fairies scandal, where like these schoolgirls created pictures of fairies and then stuck them around their garden, took photos, and claimed they'd seen this kind of paranormal entity. Loads of other skeptics could see that, you could actually notice like where the thumbtacks were in the pictures, so it was obvious they were made of cardboard, but Arthur Conan Doyle just always found a way to discount all of those other arguments against them, and he absolutely fell for it hook, line and sinker.
Is it a conscious decision is it a conscious decision, or is it arrogance? Unconscious, it would be more understandable, but consciously believing that your intelligence means that your opinion on something must therefore be inherently more right than somebody else. Is there a thread of DNA that runs through the dysrationalia where it's conscious or unconscious? Because they're two very different things from a human point of view, aren't they?
That's it. I mean, I get the feeling that, and I think this is supported by the research, that when they have come to their initial conclusion, that's very much kind of unconsciously driven. It's very emotional. They're not deliberately coming to the wrong conclusion there. But then you do have these other factors. So the rationalization that they're using in this motivated reasoning, that is very conscious. And actually, they could consciously decide, to try to think about the evidence more fairly, but they're so attached to the belief they kind of push it to one side. There are other phenomena like earned dogmatism. And that's very much like you're saying. It's like we feel that we've earned our credentials, maybe with our great success in one field, like Kary Mullis with discovering the PCR and becoming a Nobel laureate, or Arthur Conan Doyle maybe with the great success of his books. And you kind of then think you don't need to go through the normal checks and balances that other people would to prove your point of view. You think you're already so smart, that your judgment is so great, that actually your intuitions are good enough. You don't need to think carefully about the evidence.